Welcome to Voices of the Case. In this episode, we want to tell you the story of JonBenét Ramsey, the crime that divided a nation.
It's a case that haunts many people still.
Absolutely. The image of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey, a child beauty pageant queen born on August 6, 1990, is forever frozen in time. Her life was tragically and violently cut short in her family home in Boulder, Colorado.
The date was December 26th, 1996.
Yeah, a day that should have been filled with the lingering warmth of Christmas instead became synonymous with a haunting, unsolved mystery. JonBenét was found dead in her own home after being reported missing.
A discovery that just ignited a firestorm of public and media attention.
A flame that flickers to this very day. Adding to the immediate intrigue was the discovery of a lengthy handwritten ransom note found within the Ramsey residence.
A bizarre and unsettling start, wasn't it?
Completely.
A 2.5-page document. I mean, that stood in stark contrast to typical, concise kidnapping demands.
Right. That unusual length immediately signaled that something was deeply amiss.
Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, she reported her daughter missing after finding this sprawling note on the kitchen staircase.
And the ransom amount. Very specific.
Very specific, $118,000. And what makes this figure so chilling is that John Ramsey himself pointed out to investigators that it was strikingly close to his Christmas bonus from the previous year.
So, did the perpetrator possess intimate knowledge of the Ramsey family's finances? That's the immediate question.
Exactly. Investigators looked into a few possibilities. One theory considered whether employees at John's company, Access Graphics, might have known his financial details.
An inside job, maybe? Someone with a personal connection?
It was definitely considered. Another, more enigmatic theory looked at a possible religious significance, maybe linking the amount to Psalm 118.
Psalm 118, that adds a whole other layer of weirdness.
It really does. Was this a deliberate clue, a personal fixation, or just a strange coincidence? We still don't know.
And the note itself, it wasn't just long, its very existence at the crime scene was unusual.
Right. Highly unusual. The FBI advised local authorities that it's rare for a ransom note of that length to be written where the crime actually happened.
So that immediately casts doubt on the idea of an outside abduction, doesn't it?
It does. Then there's the eerie silence of the note itself, fingerprint-wise.
No prints.
Reportedly, none identifiable except for Patsy's and the investigators who handled it, and the writing style.
Yeah.
Littered with exclamation points, lots of them. And it even had these cryptic initials SBTC at the end.
SBTC. Any idea what that meant?
Still debated. Was it to intimidate, mislead, or just the writer's agitated state?
Right.
And adding another layer.
Go on.
Both the ransom note and what looked like a practice draft were written using a pen and a pad of paper found right there in the Ramsey home.
Okay, so that strongly suggests the author was already inside the house.
It certainly points that way. It undermines the idea of an external kidnapper sneaking in and out.
And didn't the CBI have some thoughts on who wrote it?
Yes, a report from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, indications that Patsy Ramsey herself might have authored the document.
Indications, but not conclusive.
Exactly. The evidence was ultimately deemed inconclusive. But that ambiguity, it fueled years of intense public scrutiny directed squarely at the Ramseys.
I can imagine. What about other experts?
While forensic pathologist Michael Baden, who consulted for both sides actually, he expressed profound skepticism about an outside intruder writing it.
Really? What did he say?
He basically said that in his extensive career, he'd never encountered a ransom note quite like it. His experience really lent weight to the theory that the note came from inside the house.
That's significant. But wasn't there a court ruling later?
Yes, the narrative took another twist. A federal court ruling later declared it highly improbable that Patsy Ramsey wrote the note.
Highly improbable. What was that based on?
It leaned heavily on the opinions of 6 certified handwriting experts and sharply criticized, self-proclaimed experts who lacked qualifications and had publicly accused Patsy without solid scientific grounds.
So conflicting expert opinions even on the note itself.
Absolutely. It highlights the complexity of handwriting analysis and the dangers of unqualified opinions. Just makes solving this case even harder.
Okay, let's shift to the immediate aftermath, the discovery of the note.
Hmm.
We need to remember, only the family, Patsy, John, and Burke, were known to be inside the house that night.
Right, an isolated setting for such a horrific crime.
And despite the ransom note explicitly saying not to call the police,
Patsy called 911 at 5:52 a.m. Mountain Time. And she didn't stop there. She also called friends and family.
that defiance of the note's instructions, it's another thing people have analyzed endlessly. Panic. something else?
Hard to say for sure. When the police arrived, their initial search was later called superficial.
And crucially, no signs of forced entry.
No discernible signs. Which again bolsters the theory that the perpetrator was already inside.
Wasn't there something about a basement door?
Yes, Officer Rick French. His brief encounter with the basement door is, well, it's haunting. He found it secured with a wooden latch.
He didn't open it.
No. He paused, but moved on. He said he was looking for an exit route, and an interior latch didn't fit that, tragically.
That's where JonBenét was later found.
Behind that very door, a critical oversight in those first crucial moments.
And the forensics team.
They arrived later that morning, but initially they assumed it was a kidnapping, so they only secured JonBenét's bedroom.
Not the whole house.
No. The rest of the house, where crucial evidence might have been, wasn't treated with the same caution initially.
Oh boy. So potential contamination right away.
Big time. And then friends, victim advocates, the family minister, they started arriving to offer support.
Well, meaning I'm sure, but...
But unintentionally, they moved through the house, potentially disturbing or even removing evidence in the kitchen and other areas. It compromised the scene, no doubt.
So Detective Linda Arndt arrives around 8 a.m. What was her focus?
Anticipating contact from the supposed kidnappers about the ransom, but nothing. The hours ticked by, silence.
That must have shifted suspicion inwards.
Inevitably. Later that day, Detective Arndt asked John Ramsey to do a more thorough search of the house. She told him to look for something unusual.
And John found her.
John, along with family friend Fleet White, went back to the basement. About 8 hours after JonBenét was reported missing, John opened that latch door.
The one Officer French hadn't opened.
The very one. And there, in a small room behind it, he found his daughter's body. A kidnapping had become a murder right there in their home.
Describe the scene. It was grim, wasn't it?
Deeply disturbing. A nylon cord around her wrists and neck, her torso partially covered by a white sheet, duct tape across her mouth, just horrific details.
And John, he moved her. Removed the tape.
He did. He removed the tape, tried to untie the cord. Understandable, perhaps, from a grieving father in shock, but...
It hindered the investigation. Contaminated evidence.
Unfortunately, yes. Critical evidence might have been disturbed. And then, the body was removed from the home that same night.
More potential compromise of the scene.
It just kept compounding, a series of missteps that haunted the investigation.
Did the Ramseys cooperate initially with samples?
Eventually, yes. They provided writing, blood, and hair samples. Initial interviews were done with John and Patsy, and even young Burke was interviewed within the first few weeks.
So the investigation started, but it was already on shaky ground because of the early handling.
A tangled web from the very beginning.
Let's talk about the autopsy. What was the official cause of death?
Strangulation, the ligature made from nylon cord, and a piece of a paintbrush handle, and a skull fracture from blunt force trauma.
2 distinct, brutal injuries. Horrifying. Was there evidence of sexual assault?
The autopsy found no evidence of conventional rape, but it couldn't be ruled out. There was evidence of vaginal injury and signs the area had been wiped or cleaned.
Adding another disturbing layer. What about the ligature itself? Any clues there?
Some unsettling details. The wooden stick used to tighten the cord had Korea printed on it in gold ink.
Korea.
Yeah, and part of another illegible word. The stick was irregularly broken, had paint and varnish traces, and some of JonBenét's hair was tangled in the neck cord.
Tiny details, but potentially huge clues. The origin of the stick, that illegible word.
Exactly. These are the threads investigators try to follow.
What's she wearing?
A white long-sleeved turtleneck with a silver sequin star and white underwear, which had urine stains.
Just sounds like a little girl ready for bed. So tragic. Any other details from the scene?
A small red ink heart drawn on her left palm, a ring on her right hand, small personal things that just amplify the loss.
And the pineapple. That became a big point of contention, didn't it?
It did. The autopsy showed pineapple in her digestive system, eaten a few hours before death, and a bowl of pineapple with a spoon was photographed on the kitchen table.
But the Ramseys didn't recall giving her any.
Neither John nor Patsy remembered giving it to her. However, investigators reported finding Burke's fingerprints on the bowl.
Burke's prints. That raises questions about who was awake and what was happening late that night.
Absolutely. It's one of those seemingly small details that became huge in the investigation.
So the key pieces, ligatures, paintbrush handle, the clothing, the pineapple, and then came the DNA evidence years later.
Right. In December 2003, using better techniques, they got a DNA profile from a mixed blood sample on JonBenét's underwear.
And it belonged to?
an unknown male. It definitively excluded John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey.
Wow. That sounds like a bombshell, pointing away from the family.
On the surface, yes. But the profile was run through CODIS, the FBI's DNA database.
Yeah.
No match. At that time, CODIS had over 1.6 million profiles. So a frustrating dead end.
Did anything change with later analysis?
Well, a 2016 report suggested the original sample was even more complex, possibly DNA from 2 individuals other than JonBenét.
2, that just muddies the waters even more.
It certainly did.
Yeah.
And then A. James Kohler, a former chief investigator for the DA's office, claimed there was more male DNA on the cord and paintbrush. And he alleged this wasn't disclosed by the DA at the time, Mary Lacy. He also mentioned up to 6 separate unknown DNA samples found through testing.
That sounds like a serious accusation. Contention about what was even found, let alone shared.
Exactly. It raises questions about transparency and the significance of this unknown DNA, hotly debated.
Oh, so what did experts think?
Former FBI profiler Candice DeLong felt the DNA appearing in multiple key locations likely belonged to the killer.
A direct link.
That was her take. But Michael Baden, the pathologist, was more cautious. He warned that trace DNA can be deposited in many innocent ways.
So no definitive proof it belonged to a stranger killer, in his view.
Right. He stressed the lack of absolute forensic proof linking that specific DNA to the actual killer. Just highlights the challenge of interpreting trace DNA.
So the investigation itself, Boulder police initially focused heavily on the Ramseys.
Yes, that's common. Look at those closest first. But by late '97, their person of interest list had ballooned to over 1,600 people.
1,600, that's huge, but still no answers.
And those early missteps we talked about, evidence contamination, lack of experienced personnel, sharing evidence with the Ramseys, delays in formal interviews, they significantly hampered everything that followed.
You mentioned divisions within the investigators.
Yeah.
Lou Smith and Steve Thomas.
Right. Lou Smith, a seasoned detective, became convinced it was an intruder. He resigned, believing the focus on the Ramseys was wrong and incompetent.
He was a strong proponent of the intruder theory.
Very strong. Steve Thomas, another key investigator, also resigned, but he cited interference from the DA's office and lack of support for the police inquiry, which was focusing more on the family.
So conflicting views and internal struggles right within the investigation.
Absolutely, muddying the waters further. Then came the grand jury in 1998.
What did they decide?
In 1999, they recommended charges against the Ramseys. Child abuse resulting in death, essentially allowing her to be in a threatening situation and obstructing the investigation.
But they weren't prosecuted.
No. The DA at the time, Alex Hunter, refused to prosecute. He felt there wasn't enough evidence for a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's a high bar. What about his successor, Mary Lacy?
Lacy took over the police investigation in late 2002. Her focus shifted heavily towards the intruder theory.
And a federal judge agreed with her.
In a related defamation case, yes, a judge in 2003 found the evidence presented in that case more consistent with an intruder than with Patsy being involved. Lacy really embraced that intruder theory.
Culminating in that apology letter in 2008.
Yes, a highly controversial move. She publicly stated the family was completely cleared by touch DNA evidence.
But not everyone agreed. Beckner, the police chief.
Correct. Former Chief Mark Beckner publicly disagreed, arguing the DNA was limited and possibly unrelated. The debate over the DNA's meaning just never went away.
Was the case ever reopened after that?
Yes, in 2009, under a new DA, Stan Garnett. But he found the statute of limitations for those 1999 grand jury charges had expired.
So no review of a potential case against the Ramseys then?
No. And further efforts in 2010, new interviews, latest DNA tech, reportedly yielded nothing new.
Still an active case, though.
As of 2016, yes. Boulder Police Chief Greg Testa confirmed it remains an active homicide investigation. The search for resolution continues.
Let's talk more about the suspicions towards the family. Their behavior early on raised flags.
It did. Their seemingly defensive attitude, hiring lawyers and PR representation quickly. While understandable, perhaps, it drew suspicion in that high-pressure situation.
And suspicion even fell on Burke, their son. He was only 9.
Yes, fueled by ideas of sibling rivalry. That past golf club incident where he accidentally hit JonBenét, and a comment he reportedly made to a psychologist. Scrutinizing a child in that trauma is difficult.
The family always maintained they had a good relationship.
Consistently and vehemently. Police did try to re-interview Burke in 2010, though.
Did the suspicion ever really go away? Kohler's book.
Kohler's 2012 book certainly fueled it again, proposing scenarios of family involvement and dismissing the intruder idea. and public perception heavily influenced by media.
Often lean toward the family being involved.
Frequently, yes, fueled by controversial theories. The media spotlight itself was intense, sometimes obscuring evidence, raising ethical questions about true crime reporting.
And statistically, family members are often involved in child homicides, unfortunately.
It's a grim reality investigators always consider. Plus, the lack of forced entry, signs that maybe the scene was staged.
What kind of staging?
Well, details that didn't fit a typical outside invasion. It led to speculation. One theory suggested Patsy might have accidentally killed JonBenét, maybe after a bedwetting incident, and then panicked, covered it up.
But no history of rage.
None known. And Burke later publicly denied any family abuse. There was even talk the strangulation might have been a red herring, meant to distract.
Was Burke ever officially a suspect?
Authorities publicly stated in 98 and 99 that he was not a suspect, based partly on assessments from a child psychologist suggesting a healthy family dynamic, but public suspicion lingered.
The Ramseys offered a reward, didn't they?
Yes, $100,000. But their formal police interviews didn't happen for over 4 months after the body was found, which fueled more scrutiny.
And the governor urged them to cooperate more.
Yes, Governor Bill Owens in 1999 underscored the frustration with the lack of progress.
Then those grand jury indictments against the parents came out years later?
Released publicly in 2013, yes.
Yeah.
Revealed they'd been indicted in 99 for child abuse resulting in death, even though Hunter didn't sign off.
And the CBS program in 2016. That pointed fingers directly at Burke.
It did. Theorized he accidentally killed her with a flashlight after an argument about pineapple, and the ransom note was a cover-up.
Leading to lawsuits.
Burke sued CBS and others involved for defamation. Those suits were settled later.
Okay, let's pivot to the intruder theory. What evidence supports that?
The main physical piece is that unidentified boot mark found in the basement near where JonBenét's body was discovered. Seems to suggest someone else was there.
Were there early suspects who were cleared?
Several. A neighbor who played Santa, Bill McReynolds, a former housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pugh, a man named Michael Helgoth who died by suicide shortly after. All investigated and cleared.
Did they try matching the DNA to potential intruders?
Reportedly conducted hundreds of DNA tests trying to find a match to that unknown male profile, but no conclusive link at the time.
And Lou Smith remained the biggest champion of this theory.
Absolutely. His detailed theory involved entry through a basement window, possibly left ajar for Christmas lights, or a broken window.
Despite the spider webs across the broken window, that's always puzzled me.
It's a point of contention, for sure. Smith suggested the intruder used a stun gun, carried her to the basement, killed her, and left the note as a diversion.
And he got support from John Douglas, the FBI profiler.
Douglas was hired by the Ramseys and did support the intruder idea. But Smith's conviction ultimately led him to resign from the official investigation.
What other intruder theories were there? Child pornography links.
Stephen Singular's book explored that angle, citing JonBenét's pageant involvement. It was also noted there were many burglaries in the area beforehand and registered sex offenders nearby.
Circumstantial, but adds to the possibility.
Factors that lend some credence to a random or opportunistic crime, yes. Former DA Trip DeMuth and Detective Steve Ainsworth later called for a more aggressive investigation of the intruder angle.
Was anyone else ever seriously considered as an intruder suspect? Gary Howard Oliva.
Oliva was identified later as a potential suspect and came under scrutiny, and that 2016 A&E documentary concluded an unidentified male was likely responsible based on their DNA interpretation.
So the DA's office under Lacey really did pursue the intruder theory.
According to former Denver DA Craig Silverman, yes. And Gordon Crooms, who worked in Lacey's office, confirmed her strong support for it, and the pressure felt internally to follow that line.
Then there was that bizarre false confession. John Mark Carr.
Alexis Fowler and Reich, formerly John Mark Carr, arrested in Bangkok in 2006 after confessing, claimed he drugged, sexually assaulted, and accidentally killed JonBenét.
But it was false.
Completely. Zero physical evidence linking him. His story about drugging her contradicted the autopsy, and crucially, his DNA didn't match the crime scene DNA.
Just a waste of resources and more confusion.
Absolutely, a bizarre detour. Reich later engaged in other strange behavior, name changes, emails, and disturbing allegations surfaced about intentions towards children.
And Gary Oliva, the other potential suspect, didn't he allegedly confess in letters?
In 2019, Daily Mail TV reported Oliva had supposedly pleaded guilty in letters to a former classmate, claiming it was an accident. The validity and impact of those alleged letters remain unclear.
This case also spawned a lot of lawsuits, didn't it? Defamation suits?
A significant number, filed by the Ramseys and their lawyer, Lynn Wood, against media outlets like Star Magazine, book authors, individuals.
Were the Ramseys ever sued over their own book?
Yes, over the death of innocents, but those suits were dismissed. A judge in one case concluded there was abundant evidence pointing towards an intruder possibility.
And Burke's lawsuit against CBS?
That was settled out of court in 2019, ending that specific legal fight over the documentary's allegations.
Finally, the case has really seeped into popular culture, hasn't it?
Sadly, yes. The South Park episode, which the creators later regretted, the Mr. Kitty song Destroy Me using her image, TV movies, documentaries like Casting JonBenét, even a Mexican telenovela episode inspired by it.
Just shows the enduring, morbid fascination this unsolved crime holds.
It really does. The sheer volume of information, the conflicting theories, those early investigative missteps, and the core mystery, it all continues to captivate and confound.
And the central question, who killed JonBenét Ramsey, remains unanswered. A legacy of speculation.
A truly haunting case with no closure.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Case. Don't forget to subscribe and see you next time.